Members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang are thought to have robbed, extorted, and killed people. The 10 most feared Hells Angels in US prisons are a mix of men and monsters. But why are they so dangerous in prison? Is it their loyalty to the club, their violent behavior, or their willingness to do anything to protect their reputation? This in-depth look will reveal the truth about the most feared Hells Angels in jail. Number 10. Paul Merl Eischeid. The idea that Paul Eischeid leads a double life is not widely accepted by the general public. Over the course of the day, he appeared to be a typical individual. As a stockbroker, Paul Eischeid was known for his dapper appearance and his professional demeanor. In Mesa, Arizona, he was able to maintain a steady life by working diligently. When compared to the dark and secret side of him, this was a very different aspect. Eischeid was a member of the Hells Angels, a notorious biker gang that is accused of being violent, breaking the law, and being extremely severe about devotion to the club. Eischeid was a member of the Hells Angels. Eischeid wasn't just a casual member of the Hells Angels. He was deeply entrenched in the hazardous world of the gang, where devotion, violence, and secrecy governed everything. Eischeid was no ordinary member of the Hells Angels. An unfortunate and violent occurrence that took place on the 27th of October 2001 would solidify his reputation as a dangerous individual inside the world of bikers. It was at this point that he transformed from being a prosperous business person to a criminal who was feared around the world. Cynthia Garcia, the victim, was a mother of 6 children. When she entered the clubhouse of the Hells Angels, she had been drinking, and there is a possibility that she had said something that she should not have spoken. This was a world in which respect was of the utmost importance, and if you were to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, you may end up being killed. These members of the gang did not give it any thought. Garcia was reportedly carried into the clubhouse, where he was pummeled and eventually stabbed to death, according to the reports. The body of the deceased woman was discovered in the desert, where it had been discarded 6 days later. In light of the fact that they arrested Paul Eischeid and accused him with murder, the Hells Angels should be considered extremely cruel. The allegations were connected to gang activity, which could result in the applicant being sentenced to death. Even more stunning was the fact that Eischeid had never been convicted of a crime prior to this particular case even. Neither a criminal record, nor a history of violence, nor any connections to alcohol or drugs were present in his background. He appeared to be the guy next door, someone in whom you could have complete faith. The fact that he was a horrible guy, however, demonstrated how terrifying the Hells Angels might be. In 2003, Eischeid was freed from jail while he was waiting for his trial. Nevertheless, he was required to wear an ankle monitor and be closely monitored throughout his release. The electrical wristband, however, was not enough to stop him. During the year 2004, he was able to circumvent the monitoring system, depart the nation without leaving any trace, and escape. It was with the assistance of another Hells Angel and a forged passport that Eischeid was able to depart for Buenos Aires, which is located in Argentina. Over the course of 7 years, he managed to avoid getting into trouble by living off the grid and leading a tranquil existence that was detached from the legal system in the United States. In 2011, they discovered him in Buenos Aires, which was the year they had been looking for him. Paul Eischeid's lengthy evasion of the law was finally brought to an end when he was taken into custody. On account of his involvement in the murder of Cynthia Garcia, he was returned to Arizona to face the consequences of his actions. Eischeid was one of the most wanted individuals in the United States at this point in time. He was a stockbroker who had escaped and was now actively connected in the Hells Angels, a world that is notoriously vicious and dangerous. However, there are other stories that are similar to his. A great number of other Hells Angels, similar to him, have gained notoriety within the confines of the prison system for their aggressive behavior, their need to be in charge, and their lack of remorse for causing harm to other individuals. Number 9. Christopher Ranieri. Christopher Ranieri, who went by Ray, didn't say much, but what he did spoke volumes. He was the head of the Hells Angels Salem Charter in Massachusetts. People said he was scary. He wasn't a bully or a loudmouth. He was violent and always did what the Hells Angels told him to do. Ranieri's calmness in the rough world of outlaw motorcyclists was more dangerous than any angry shouts that could have been heard. He made it clear that he would do anything to keep his title, his land, and his honor safe. There was a small fight at the beginning of Ranieri's rise to fame that led to a terrible chain of events. Joel "Doughboy" Silver, a member of the Sonoma chapter of the Hells Angels, got into a fight with someone from the Salem chapter at a motorcycle event in California in July 2014. The fight started with a member of the Salem chapter. This broke the Hells Angels' unwritten rules of respect and loyalty. In the world of illegal motorcyclists, respect was not only a good thing to do, but it was also a way to get things done. If you crossed the lines, you would be punished. It wasn't just a little fight, it was a public display of disrespect. People like Ranieri, who did the crime, can never be forgiven for what they did. A public fight or dishonor, especially in front of witnesses, would not hurt the Hells Angels' reputation in any way. Ranieri, who was good at keeping his emotions in check, thought that the Hells Angels should handle this disrespect in the only way they knew how. Not long after the fight, Silver was invited to the Fresno clubhouse. This was a place where the Hells Angels could work out their problems in a way that couldn't be changed or undone. Silver, on the other hand, wasn't going into a room where he could make a deal. He was walking into a trap. Someone shot him in the back of the head as soon as he walked into the clubhouse. Someone took his life. He didn't get a chance to defend himself or a warning. It was a crime to kill someone. But the violence didn't stop there. The most cruel way to get rid of Silver's body was also the most cruel way. The Hells Angels used a crematorium a lot, and they called it the pizza oven. This is where the body would be burned, and there would be no evidence left. They set the truck Silver was driving on fire, burned his body, and got rid of all the proof that he had been killed. It was as if the murder had never happened. The Hells Angels were very good at getting rid of any proof of wrongdoing. They were able to clean up the mess quickly and quietly, leaving no evidence behind. People knew that Christopher Ranieri was at least partly responsible for the murder. He had thought of everything so that Silver would never be able to talk again. The FBI was quietly building its case while the Hells Angels were trying to cover their tracks. The government worked hard over the years to find out as much as they could about the Hells Angels' illegal activities. They did this by eavesdropping on phone calls, watching them, and getting people who saw what happened to tell them what they saw. The investigation found a lot more than just the murder of Silver. Ranieri was the focus of a big federal racketeering case, and as part of the investigation, he was charged with several violent crimes. His time as head of the Salem chapter was also linked to a number of other violent crimes with the same name, in addition to the murder. The FBI found a lot of threats, beatings, and abuse, such as a member's wife being sexually assaulted and a former member of the Hells Angels being beaten for hours. This was a horrible and mean way to control other people. Finally, in 2022, 22 years later, the government was ready to punish Ranieri. After the first trial in 2023, a jury found him guilty of a number of crimes. One of these crimes was the murder of Joel Silver. Ranieri was found guilty of more than one crime that involved violence. He was part of a bigger, more dangerous operation that had been going on for years and involved all kinds of illegal activities that the Hells Angels had kept secret. Christopher Ranieri is still in a high-security prison today, where he is serving a life sentence. His conviction will always connect his name to the violent past of the Hells Angels. It was a big step forward in the fight against organized crime among street bikers. He made sure his brother wouldn't say anything, but that was the end of him. Some criminals use silence to hide, but others, like Ranieri, use it to show their strength and keep their empire in check. Number 8. Adam Lee Hall.
For the term of life without the possibility of parole.
Adam Lee Hall was not like most members of a biker gang. He had already gone past the point where just being a member was enough. Hall was a high-ranking member of the Massachusetts chapter of the Hells Angels. He was known for being violent, but also for being strategic and cold-blooded. His story isn't just about a gang leader who wants power, it's also about a man who crossed a line that even the tough world of outlaw bikers doesn't talk about very often. Even people who were used to the Hells Angels' violence were shocked by Hall's move in 2011. There was no turf war, no rival gang, and no other criminal activity that took up most of the club's time. No, Adam Lee Hall did what he did for a more personal reason. He felt betrayed. One of the most important rules for the Hells Angels is loyalty. But what happens when one of their own breaks that rule? For Hall, the answer was violence, and the stakes were deadly. David Glasser, a key witness in an assault case against Hall, was the target. He wasn't a criminal or a biker and didn't have anything to do with the Hells Angels. He was just a person who had the guts to speak out against the powerful gang, which could mean death in their world. With the help of two friends, Edward Frampton, a local drug counselor, and Robert Chadwell, a Special Olympics athlete, Glasser was about to do something that would change his life forever. They thought it was their moral duty to testify against Hall, so they did. But in the world of the Hells Angels, it was a crime to testify against a member. It not only showed their illegal activities, but it also broke the unspoken agreement of silence that was kept by fear and violence. Adam Lee Hall couldn't let these witnesses go free because they were too dangerous and likely to upset the status quo. And so, on the 27th of August 2011, he made the decision to take action. Hall and some of his friends went to Glasser's house in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It was supposed to be a casual visit to catch up, but it quickly turned into a bloodbath. Glasser and two of his friends were killed in a horrible way. The method worked surprisingly well. Hall and his men killed all three of them in one brutal act, but the killing didn't end there. Hall cut up the bodies, put them in trash bags, and then hid them in the trunk of his car. The details of this murder were not only planned, but they were also very scary in how accurate they were. These murders weren't just random, they were planned to send a message and keep people quiet. The next step was even worse. Hall and his friends drove the bodies to a secluded area of Beckett, Massachusetts, where they buried them in a shallow grave. The act's violence didn't stop with the murder. Hall's crime was different because of how far he went to make sure these men were no longer alive. The bodies were buried deep, and for 13 days, no one would know what had happened to these three men. The families didn't know what was going on, and the police didn't have any leads. The full horror of the crime didn't come out until the bodies were found. The murder shocked the small town of Pittsfield, but the effects didn't stop there. The police quickly linked Hall to the murders, and the investigation got underway. But Hall's ruthlessness didn't go down even as the police got closer. He and his friends had made sure to hide their tracks well, but this was one case that couldn't stay hidden forever. The bodies were eventually found, and the investigation showed how brutal the Hells Angels were in their work. After a long investigation and trial, Adam Lee Hall and two of his accomplices were found guilty of first-degree murder in 2014. They all got life sentences with no chance of parole. The judge was very harsh in his judgment of the crime. He said it was brutal, inhumane, and a complete lack of respect for human life. The murders weren't crimes of passion, they were planned out. And for Hall, the effects of what he did were just starting to show. Hall's violent actions were terrible, but they were just the beginning of the Hells Angels criminal network. The club had built a kingdom of fear, and each member added to the culture of violence, control, and intimidation. Hall's conviction was a big step forward in the fight against organized crime in the biker world, but it also showed how far a Hells Angel would go to keep their secrets safe. Hall would end up in jail after the trial, but his reputation would stay with him. Hall was still a powerful person, even in the cold cells of the Massachusetts State Prison. Number 7. George Wethern. It's shocking that George Wethern would betray the Hells Angels, one of the most feared and secretive criminal groups in the world. Wethern was the vice president of the Oakland Hells Angels, which was one of the gang's strongest chapters. People in his club trusted him, respected him, and were violent with him. Sonny Barger was a close friend of his, and he had an impact on the Hells Angels outside of Oakland. Hells Angels loyalty only goes so far. When Wethern, a well-respected member of the club, turned state witness, he became a symbol of betrayal. It's unusual for someone in his position to betray the Hells Angels because they take an oath of silence. It's almost impossible to leave the club without dying. But Wethern's choice to testify against his former gang members for safety changed the history of biker gangs forever. George Wethern's time with the Hells Angels was violent and controlling. After serving in the Air Force, he joined the Hells Angels and got involved in drug trafficking, smuggling weapons, and keeping the club in line. He ran the club's weapons and drug operations, dealing with dangerous people and keeping the gang's reputation up through violence. But Wethern's story took an unexpected turn. He became one of the club's most important members. His co-workers respected him, but they were also afraid of how he handled the most difficult and dangerous situations. His 156-acre ranch in Northern California was the home base for the Hells Angels and a place to hide out. Wethern was strong, but the Hells Angels were scary. In 1998, the Hells Angels fought brutal wars over territory with the Mongols and outlaws. Many people died in these wars, and there was a lot of violence. Wethern faced more than just gangs that were fighting each other. The Hells Angels were very harsh on people who were disloyal or disagreed with them. 3 bodies were found on Wethern's ranch in 1998. The victims were members of the Hells Angels who were not liked. The murders were violent, exact, and cold-blooded. The Hells Angels' code of loyalty said that members had to be completely loyal, which is what caused these deaths. This was a turning point in Wethern's career with the Hells Angels. Wethern's career with the Hells Angels didn't end because of the murders. Instead, he betrayed his club because he was afraid of losing everything. In 2000, Wethern was arrested for killing 3 members of the Hells Angels. Everything changed when he was offered a deal while he was waiting for trial. If he became a state's witness, he could avoid prison for life. Wethern, who used to be one of the most feared members of the Hells Angels, shocked both his fellow gang members and the police by testifying against them. His testimony blew up. For the first time, the police saw how the Hells Angels worked. Wethern talked about drug trafficking, arms sales, and the club's brutal ways of keeping control. He said that the Hells Angels were like a well-oiled criminal machine, with each member playing a part in its survival and success. Law enforcement got important information from his front-row view of the club's most secret activities. Wethern was taking a big risk by going against the Hells Angels. He knew that if he testified, he would definitely get the death penalty. Wethern thought he would be killed if it became known that he was working with the police because the Hells Angels had a history of killing traitors. He worked with the police because he needed to stay alive, and they promised to protect him as a witness. When Wethern testified, his wife and kids were put in witness protection and given new identities. But his life would never be the same again. Even though Wethern was safe from Hells Angels, his old friends never forgot that he betrayed them. His proof broke up the Hells Angels, but they still exist all over the world. The biker gang took Wethern's name off their records, but his actions stayed. After he testified, Wethern went missing. He and his family may have changed their names and moved to the US, but no one knows where they are. He might still be afraid and always looking for revenge, or he might be living in peace and quiet, far away from the Hells Angels he used to lead. Without a doubt, Wethern's actions shook the Hells Angels' base. Number 6. Robert Chico Mora. Anyone who had crossed the Hells Angels would have been scared just by hearing the name Robert Chico Mora. Before Arizona was known for the infamous biker gang, it was ruled by the Dirty Dozen motorcycle club. But in 1999, when Mora and his crew helped bring the Dirty Dozen into the Hells Angels, Arizona changed overnight. The patch over from the Dirty Dozen to the Hells Angels wasn't just a name change. It was a hostile takeover that brought violence, drugs, and a reign of terror to the area that lasted for years. Mora was the brains behind this takeover, and people were scared of him because he was so unpredictable. Mora was a man who could hit quickly and without warning. He didn't think twice about getting rid of anyone who dared to question his authority. His power and influence reached well beyond Arizona. His name meant something to everyone who worked with the Hells Angels, and anyone who crossed him, whether it was a rival biker, a police officer, or even another Hells Angel, would pay for it right away. Mora's story isn't just about how a biker gang became violent when they moved into a new area. It's also about how the Hells Angels run their business as a crime group. Mora led the Arizona chapter to become a major player in drug trafficking, arms dealing, and organized violence. He ruled the local drug trade with an iron fist, making money from the methamphetamine and cocaine pipelines that ran through the state. Robert Mora was already a major player in the Hells Angels' criminal activities by the time federal agents started Operation Black Biscuit in 2003. The goal of the operation was to break up a criminal network that dealt with guns, drugs, and violent crimes. Mora became the main focus. Police had enough proof to charge him with conspiracy, drug trafficking, and planning the murder of a federal agent who was working undercover and whom he thought was a rival biker. The operation was a disaster. Federal agents raided several homes and businesses, taking huge amounts of weapons, explosives, and cash. But Mora, like a lot of experienced criminals, knew how to work the system. He was one of the most wanted men in Arizona, but he was able to avoid being found guilty of the most serious charges by taking advantage of legal loopholes and weak evidence. Mora's trial is a well-known example of how the Hells Angels could use the legal system to their advantage. Mora got a light sentence of 18 months for having body armor illegally because there wasn't much evidence, and his defense team knew how to take advantage of the system. Law enforcement didn't like this outcome. Mora was able to get away with a short sentence even though there was a lot of evidence against him. The whole thing, which was supposed to deal a big blow to the Hells Angels in Arizona, ended with a whimper. Robert Mora's story didn't end there, though. People in the state, especially those in organized crime, were still scared of him long after he was released. Mora's name still meant something in prison. His relatively short sentence didn't change the fact that people thought of him as a cold, calculating criminal. Even after he got out of jail, he was still a very respected and feared member of the Hells Angels. He was a warning to anyone who crossed the line in the world of outlaw bikers. He was an unpredictable force in the criminal underworld because he could control the system and used violence. The Hells Angels are known for being very strict about loyalty, but the club is also known for being able to change and stay alive even when police are watching. Robert Mora was a great example of how adaptable this was. He was able to avoid the full consequences of his actions and keep his power from behind bars, which shows how deeply the Hells Angels were involved in crime. Even though Mora got a relatively short sentence, his reputation for violence never went away. The club still had a strong hold on Arizona, and Mora's name was still linked to some of the worst acts of violence in the area. He was still a mysterious person, even after his short time in prison. His name alone was a reminder of how powerful and violent the Hells Angels were. Robert Mora was able to avoid the full force of the law, but his criminal empire kept getting bigger. In the world of the Hells Angels, people not only respected him, they were scared of him. Mora's story is a scary reminder of how far the Hells Angels will go to protect their power, territory, and reputation. Number 5. Maurice Boucher. Not only in the world of outlaw bikers, but also in the criminal underworld of Canada as a whole, the name Maurice Boucher makes people afraid. Boucher was not just a member of the Hells Angels Montreal chapter, he was also one of the most feared leaders. He was a key player in one of the deadliest and most violent biker wars in history. The Hells Angels became a major player in the Quebec Biker War under his leadership. This war would leave behind a legacy of bloodshed, destruction, and ruthless power. In the 1990s, the Hells Angels and the Rock Machine, a rival gang, fought a bloody war in Quebec over who would control the drug trade. What began as a fight for land and money quickly turned into a full-blown war that killed more than 160 people, including innocent people who were caught in the crossfire. Maurice Boucher, who went by the name Mom, was one of the main people behind the Hells Angels war strategy. His nickname was ironic because he was violent. Under his command, the Montreal chapter did terrible things to hurt and scare people, making it clear to their enemies that no one was safe from the Hells Angels' anger. Boucher was a violent leader who was willing to go after anyone who got in his way. He not only ordered his gang to kill rival bikers, but he also showed that he would do anything to stay in charge, even hurt innocent people. Boucher's orders led to the bombing of a car meant for a rival gang member, which was one of the most shocking events of the war. The explosion didn't kill the intended target, it killed a young child who was just passing by. This cruel move shocked the whole community and made the Hells Angels' reputation for violence even worse. The Quebec Biker War had terrible effects, but Maurice Boucher's reign of terror didn't end with it. He had a lot of power and influence outside of Quebec, and for years no one could challenge his control over the Hells Angels' operations in Canada. Boucher's leadership was not just about controlling the drug trade, it was also about making people afraid. He was a master of manipulation, and he kept his gang in line with both fear and loyalty. But, like many powerful crime bosses, Boucher's time in charge would come to an end. After years of investigation and gathering information, law enforcement finally caught up with him in 2002. Authorities were able to build a case that would put Maurice Boucher behind bars for good, thanks to a number of wiretaps, undercover operations, and the testimony of people who knew him. The charges against him were terrible. He was accused of ordering the deaths of several rival bikers, including 2 correctional officers who were killed just because Boucher wanted to send a message to the police. The arrest of Maurice Boucher was a huge step forward in the fight against organized crime in Canada. The Hells Angels were shocked by his conviction because it meant that one of their most powerful and respected leaders had finally been brought to justice. But the Hells Angels still had power in Canada after Boucher was caught. His name still meant something, even when he was in prison, and the gang's activities in Quebec and beyond kept his legacy alive. Boucher was found guilty of murder in 2002 and given a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. He was arrested, but even in a maximum security prison, he was still a symbol of fear and control. Even though his power was less, he still had power over the Hells Angels in Canada. His time in prison didn't end his legacy. It just meant that he would still have power from inside the prison walls. Maurice Boucher's story is full of violence, power, and control. He was a man who used fear and intimidation to build an empire, and his role in the Quebec Biker War will always be remembered as one of the most important events in the history of the Hells Angels. Even though he was found guilty, his name still stands for fear and violence in the biker world. Boucher was a tough leader in Canada, but in the United States, there was someone else who had taken the Hells Angels to new heights. This person had power and influence that went beyond the criminal world and into the mainstream. Number 4. Sonny Barger. Sonny Barger is more than just a name. He is a legend. Barger was the face of the Hells Angels, and he turned them from a motorcycle club into a worldwide criminal organization. The story is about the Hells Angels. Barger, the leader of Oakland, was violent and out of control. He was known to the media. His group was what made him who he was. His impact went beyond bikers, and his name is still famous in the history of crime. In 1938, Ralph Sonny Barger was born in Modesto, California. He quickly became known for not following the rules. He joined the US Army when he was 16, but they kicked him out because he was too wild. After that, Barger broke the rules of society and became an outlaw. He started the Oakland Hells Angels chapter in 1957, which helped the gang grow quickly. Barger turned the Hells Angels from a group of motorcycle fans into a worldwide crime group. Barger wanted the club to be more than just a place to ride motorcycles. His goals were to have power, control, and a close-knit brotherhood based on loyalty. Barger was a smart leader who knew that the club's scary reputation was very important. Along with the streets, he helped the Hells Angels make money through drug trafficking, gun dealing, and other illegal activities. The Hells Angels became famous around the world after they played at the Altamont Free concert in 1969. The Rolling Stones concert changed how people saw the Hells Angels forever. The Hells Angels were hired to keep the peace, but they got into fights with concertgoers and killed Meredith Hunter with a knife. Gimme Shelter made the event and the Hells Angels' violent behavior famous, forever linking it to violence and chaos. Barger's life changed when the Hells Angels showed how strong they were. The violence went on. Barger's illegal business grew over time. The Hells Angels sold drugs, extorted money, and fought with other gangs. Barger was arrested many times for breaking the law, which gave him a criminal record. In 1988, he was charged with drug trafficking, assault, conspiracy, and making plans to bomb a rival biker clubhouse. Even though he had these legal problems, Barger didn't get long prison sentences. Part of the reason for this was that he was a high-ranking member of the Hells Angels and knew the law. People know that Sonny Barger survived prison. Barger spent almost 13 years in prison, but he never lost his spirit or his role as leader of the Hells Angels. In prison, he got stronger in the group. Barger was famous among outlaw bikers, not just in California. He stood for rebellion, refusing to be quiet no matter what. In 1988, Barger got out of jail for trying to blow up a rival clubhouse. He became the face of the Hells Angels after jail and kept building the club's empire. He stayed in charge of the Hells Angels and became a cultural icon. Barger was a criminal and a best-selling writer. He wrote and published Hells Angel, The Life and Times of Sonny Barger, and the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club to show how the gang worked. He was in Sons of Anarchy because he was famous, and the show was based on the real-life work of the Hells Angels. Barger had an impact on the 21st century because he was still a member of the Hells Angels and spread the club's values of violence, loyalty, and brotherhood. Barger worked with the gang, even though he was getting worse. Names of bikers still matter. People were scared of him and respected him in his last years. He died of cancer in 2022. Sonny Barger is no longer alive, but his legacy lives on. Since he died, the Hells Angels have had a hard time, but they are still one of the most feared and powerful criminal groups in the world. The story of Sonny Barger is one of determination and hard work. He became a well-known figure in the biker world as the leader of the Hells Angels. Many people thought Barger was the perfect outlaw, a man who lived by his own rules and couldn't be stopped by anyone, not even the law. He built an empire, and he will always be linked to the Hells Angels. Number 3. Thomas Heath. Thomas Heath was a cruel Hells Angel who belonged to the Ventura chapter. This group used extreme violence to make people stay loyal. Most people think of biker gangs as having loud motorcycles, leather vests, and strong friendships, but Thomas Heath thought of the Hells Angels as more than that. They turned you into a violent, dangerous, and strong person. Heath was used to violence. It was just how things were. A horrible bombing made Heath permanently connected to the Hells Angels' violence. A bomb in an auto shop in Los Angeles in 1977 killed a 22-year-old man and a teenage boy. These two people were not involved in the Hells Angels' fight with the Mongols Motorcycle Club over territory. The other Mongols gang put the bombs in their business, but the explosion killed two innocent bystanders, which shows how little the Hells Angels care about human life when they are fighting for power. The deaths of the Hells Angels were sad, but they showed how cruel they were. The blast was meant for other riders, but it didn't care. It killed two innocent people, which hurt families and the community. Even though there was proof of violence, the police couldn't connect the bombing to Heath or any other Hells Angels member. The Hells Angels scared people in Southern California without caring that people were dying for power. The crime was never solved. Heath didn't believe that the bombing was a one-time thing. It fit with the violent behavior that followed him everywhere. Heath had done violent things before he was found guilty of bombing in 1992. His attack on his wife with a deadly weapon was very scary. Heath's violence went beyond fights over motorcycles and became personal. It showed him the way he was. His willingness to hurt anyone, even his wife, showed how scary he was. More than 20 years after the bombs in 1994, the police caught Heath. He was found guilty of killing two people in Los Angeles who were not involved in the crime. His 7-year prison sentence was just the beginning of the end of his criminal career. Heath was still violent in jail. While in prison, he did more illegal things, which made him one of the most dangerous members of the Hells Angels. Heath's conviction for murder wasn't the end of his story. He didn't want to stop being violent. He was still a danger to police and other prisoners even in jail. He was a Hells Angel and a key member of the group before he got there. Heath was not just a violent person who got into trouble. He was a key member of a violent group. In 2010, Heath's life changed when he went back to court to face new charges. This wasn't a bombing or a strike. Instead, he was accused of terrorism on the street and trying to scare witnesses. The court system had to act quickly on these new charges because he had so many criminal convictions. It was clear that Heath's violent behavior had come back. This time, he wouldn't get away with it. Heath was sentenced to 35 years to life in prison in 2011, which put an end to his terror. His lawyers said the case had nothing to do with the Hells Angels, but the jury couldn't ignore Heath's violent past and his membership in the Hells Angels. There was no denying that he was a member of the Hells Angels, and in court, it was just as much a part of his criminal past as the charges against him. The jurors saw a man who did terrible things because he was a member of a violent gang. Heath's conviction was a rare moment of justice in a system that had a hard time dealing with the Hells Angels' power. Heath thought of prison as an extension of his violent life outside of it. Even though he would spend the rest of his life in prison, his friends and other prisoners were still scared of him. Even if Thomas Heath never walks again, his memory will live on. He showed that the Hells Angels thought violence was a tool, not a last resort. The Hells Angels thought that respect came from being strong and that weak people should be thrown away. Heath lived by this code, which showed how hard life was for the Hells Angels. Number 2. Merl Hefferman. Merl Hefferman wasn't the type of Hells Angel who made headlines with violent outbursts or public brawls. People called him the Fixer instead. He was a man who worked quietly behind the scenes to clean up the messes left by the club's more well-known members. He was in charge of the Fresno chapter of the Hells Angels, and other members respected him for how well he could handle tough situations with cold, efficient violence. Hefferman's reputation didn't come from being the most violent or brutal member of the gang. It came from his ability to solve problems without leaving any evidence. His job wasn't just to follow the Hells Angels' rules, it was to get rid of threats, no questions asked. In July 2014, a member of the Hells Angels named Joel Silver stepped out of line, and Hefferman did something very scary. Silver, a full-patched member of the Sonoma chapter, had a fight with a high-ranking member of the Fresno chapter. This caused a lot of tension that could have broken up the Hells Angels' unity and silence, which they valued so highly. Respect isn't just a nicety in the world of outlaw bikers, it's a way of life. It was risky to disrespect the chain of command, especially in front of other people, and Silver's actions could not go unpunished. Hefferman didn't have to face Silver directly. He was too late to help. Silver had already been shot in the back of the head. But in the world of the Hells Angels, violence was often just the beginning. The next step after killing someone was to get rid of all evidence of the crime. That's when Hefferman showed up. His job was to destroy the evidence and make the body disappear without anyone noticing. The murder was quick and effective. Silver was tricked into going to the Fresno clubhouse, where he was killed. His body was taken to a crematorium, which is known for getting rid of bodies in ways that leave no trace. Levi Phipps ran this crematorium, which the Hells Angels used for their most evil deeds. Here, bodies were burned to ashes without a funeral, a police investigation, or any clues left behind. Hefferman's part in the cover-up was planned out. Hefferman called Phipps the day after Silver's murder and told him to leave the back door of the crematorium open. 2 men came with Silver's body and put it in the furnace. There would be no autopsy, no official cause of death, just ashes. They also set fire to the truck Silver had been driving, making sure that no one could connect the murder to the Hells Angels. What made this even worse was that it wasn't the only time something like this happened. It was well known that Hefferman had a history of cleaning up after the Hells Angels. Over the years, other club members also went missing under suspicious circumstances. People who had crossed the Hells Angels or who were too much of a risk were just killed. Hefferman didn't just kill one person. He was an important part of the machine that kept the Hells Angels' operations running smoothly, without leaving any evidence that they were doing violent things. 3 other Hells Angels members went missing without a trace in the years after Silver's murder, and all of them had something to do with Hefferman. Robbie Huff, Art Carasses, and Juan Guevara all had ties to the Fresno chapter and went missing in strange ways. Hefferman was never formally charged with their deaths, but investigators thought he might have been involved in their disappearances and helped hide any evidence of their involvement in club activities. The disappearances were in line with the Hells Angels' habit of getting rid of anyone who might be a threat to their business, and Hefferman had become very good at making sure those threats were taken care of. Hefferman's crimes finally caught up with him in October 2022, but it wasn't for murder. Instead, he was found guilty of obstructing justice in the Silver case. He had played a big role in hiding the murder by getting rid of the body and destroying any evidence. Even though he wasn't charged with murder, the conviction made it clear how the Hells Angels deal with problems within the group. Hefferman's 4-year prison sentence was just another chapter in the long history of the Hells Angels' crimes. It was a reminder that gang members often used violence and destruction to keep their loyalty and silence. Even after he was found guilty, Hefferman's name was still linked to one of the worst things the Hells Angels did, being able to kill anyone who threatened the club's power. He was a key player in the gang's operations because he was a fixer, which meant he could solve any problem with violence and silence. But law enforcement has been slowly taking away the Hells Angels' control over the criminal underworld, so people like Hefferman are becoming less common. Number 1. Raymond Folks. Raymond Ray Folks was more than just a leader of the Hells Angels. He was a powerful figure. Folks was the president of the Hells Angels Sonoma chapter. He was the kind of person who used cold, calculated violence that made the gang so feared in the criminal world. His story is about power, revenge, and how far he would go to keep control, even if it meant breaking rules that others wouldn't. People didn't just fight for his status. He made sure that anyone who threatened it was dealt with in the most brutal way possible. People's rise to fame began with a string of financial crimes that would later link him to a big racketeering case. He was part of a huge mortgage fraud and money laundering scheme in 2011 that cost millions of dollars. His business wasn't just about making money. It was also about getting power. People made fake documents, sent in fake bank records, and took out fake loans to buy expensive homes all over Northern California. One of these properties was even used to grow marijuana in secret, which made his criminal empire even bigger. A man who used to be a big deal in the Hells Angels Sonoma chapter had now moved into the world of white-collar crime, where he mixed violence with financial manipulation. But Raymond Folks didn't have enough money. He wanted power more than anything else, and when people betrayed him or threatened him, he acted quickly and without mercy. In 2014, Folks learned that his longtime partner had gone too far by having an affair with Folks' common-law wife. Raymond Folks could never forgive someone for doing something like that. Being loyal to the Hells Angels and to him personally was the most important thing. In his world, being disloyal meant being punished with extreme violence, and this was about to be shown in a way that would leave a permanent mark. People's revenge wasn't just an act of rage, it was a planned and brutal killing. He tricked his ex-partner into coming to a warehouse by pretending to want to talk about the situation. But once the man got inside, the doors locked behind him, and what happened next was hours of torture that left the victim broken and bloody. People didn't just hit the man, he made sure the message was clear. The pain wasn't just to punish, it was also to remind you that in the world of the Hells Angels, there was no forgiveness for betrayal. But Folks wasn't finished. Folks tortured his ex-girlfriend before moving on to the woman who had wronged him. He also attacked her in a way that he thought would show that he was in charge. The violence was brutal, and it shook the Hells Angels to their core. This wasn't just about getting back at someone for him, it was also about making sure that no one could betray him without facing the worst consequences. He had created a new kind of fear among the Hells Angels, one where loyalty to each other was more important than anything else. After this shocking act, the police paid attention. People had been in way too many violent situations for anyone to ignore. It was clear that he was involved with organized crime, and his violent actions were starting to get the attention of the police. The FBI started looking into Raymond Folks, and he became the focus of a large federal racketeering case. His name had become a synonym for terror, and he was linked to witness intimidation, illegal weapons, and organized violence. Raymond Folks was arrested in 2016 after years of investigation and charged with RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, conspiracy, assault with a deadly weapon, and other crimes. There was a lot of evidence against him, like wiretaps, surveillance footage, and testimonies from former Hells Angels members who had seen his violent reign firsthand. Raymond Folks was not just a figurehead in the Hells Angels, he was a key player in a violent criminal group that operated across the country. Raymond Folks was found guilty of all charges in 2021, including conspiracy and assault with a deadly weapon. He was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. The violence he had caused over the years finally caught up with him, and the law finally held him responsible for being a part of one of the most powerful outlaw biker gangs in the world. For Folks, prison wasn't the end of his life. It was just another part of a life full of violence, revenge, and power. His reign of terror, which lasted for years, was over, but his legacy lived on. Raymond Folks had shown that the Hells Angels were a gang that was based not only on loyalty, but also on fear. In the world of the Hells Angels, people who crossed the line didn't just lose their status, they also lost their lives. Raymond Folks' story is about ambition, power, and the never-ending search for control. He was more than just a member of the Hells Angels, he was a symbol of the gang's worst side. His violent ways and lack of compassion left a lasting mark on the club, and what he did is a scary reminder of how far the Hells Angels would go to keep things under control.